Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and it's that time again. It's midweek, and I want you to play some Magic because you can win 2 rare or better ICRs in doing so. This week's midweek Magic, they've kind of flipped the spooky on us Northern Hemisphere folks because we're getting springtime spooky. We're going to go to Innistrad and build decks with just the, well, kind of 3.5 Innistrad sets here. All other cards are basically banned for this micro format, but you can play any card from any of those 3.5 sets and it's going to be pretty awesome. I am going to be focusing on the werewolf deck and its many possible builds here because really that deck doesn't want or need or get better with any cards that aren't from Innistrad. But before we get into all that, allow me to do the awkward thing and promote the channel. A while back, one of my viewers was kind enough to point out that we are the only channel putting out timely midweek Magic content. So be sure to subscribe right here at the Planeswalker Stronghold for all of your future midweek Magic needs because we will be bringing you a deck list or strategy every single week. So what do you say we put all this aside and just get to that? All right, so somewhat obviously, the easiest option to get through this week's midweek Magic is just to pick up the On the Hunt deck from down here in your starter decks. That's the red-green werewolves deck, and it is out of the box pretty much 100% standard legal Innistrad. The only exceptions here are some of the tempo lands, Racer's Ring, Rugged Highlands, and Wooded Ridgeline here are not from any of the Innistrad inspired sets, so you need to adjust the land base a little bit. Beyond that, this deck is 100% playable in this event, out of the box, ready to go. And if you're very new and you're not familiar with playing the deck, I've got a link down in the doobly-doo below talking about a recent video that I did on the starter deck duels where I did several playthroughs with this deck. Because not only is it part of your starter decks, it is, in my opinion, the best one available. But there's no particular reason to run this deck as is. It's very easily upgradable. And in fact, I will have a link once again down in the doobly-doo for a complete day one rebuild of this deck to make it even better, even more efficient, and still only uses cards that I know every player has, even if today is your first day on Arena. So if those segments fit you, check out the links down below. And if you have moved beyond that, stay tuned because the rest of this video is all going to be talking about upgrades from the Shadows over Innistrad Remastered set, as well as its companion Shadows of the Past. All right, now to start this conversation, we are going to take a look at our collection. And for those that don't already know, we'll do a brief tutorial here. And well, if you do already know this, please just bear with me for a moment. For the new folks, by clicking on decks, it will bring up all of your various decks. But what we're interested in is the collection button down here in the lower left. Click there, and then you want to hit this slider button right in here, and that's going to bring up your advanced filtering. Now, of course, we could select the standard legal sets, but we really just talked about those to some degree, and there's not anything that is really super useful that's not already in that deck, although you might want to adjust quantities depending upon your play style and your individual collection. And for this conversation, I am going to do the not collected as well, so you can see cards even if they're not in my collection. And we are mostly going to talk about the commons and uncommons, because the odds are this deck is probably not worth investing rares and mythics at this point. I don't really think it's going to be strong enough in any of the Eternal formats, be it Explorer or Historic Brawl, to really warrant a rare or mythic wild card. But hey, use your own judgment. But for now, we're mostly just going to look at the rares and mythics. Once we have selected the set that we're interested in this case, Shadows over Innistrad, and the common and uncommons, we're going to say okay. And there we go. From here, I'm going to type in the simple word wolf. And, well, this is a very thematic tribal deck. So if a card doesn't say wolf, we're probably not terribly interested in it. The main thing to know about wolves when we get into the Eternal formats is there is no night and day cycle. So your wolves are going to transform independently of that. The main thing being here is if you play a double-sided wolf, it's never going to come in on its backside because there is no night mechanic to make it transform as soon as it hits. That is going to transform on its own cycles. Cards that I think are worth consideration here are Village Messenger, because it is a hasty 1-drop, and aggro is what this deck really wants to be about. Also, Scourge Wolf, that has a 2/2 for 2 with First Strike, is very, very potent. And if you happen to hit that Delirium, meaning you have 4 different card types in your graveyard, it in turn becomes double strike instead of just first strike. Either very, very good. Conduit of Storms has a different sort of transformation trigger, being that you just pay mana and it transforms, and it functionally cannot transform back. The nice thing about this particular card is a 3-mana 2/3. You can play it on turn 3. Then on turn 4, even if you don't have, or excuse me, if you do play an additional land, now you've got 4 mana from lands, and swing this, you get a 5th mana in your second main phase, which can then transform it into a 5/4 Eldrazi Werewolf forever and ever. Amen. Very interesting card, but that transformation mechanic is a little trickier. Gyre Reacher Bandit is a fairly awesome werewolf. This was actually a rare in its original printing, and it has been downcosted to an uncommon. 3 mana, 3/2 with haste. It's pretty good. Whenever a werewolf enters the battlefield under your control, you may transform it. That is on the flip side. And of course, it can transform, so this kind of breaks that no night cycle capability a little bit. So depending upon what your collection looks like, this can be a nice little addition. Ulrich's Kindred, I think, is a little overrated and a bit of a limited item. For 4 mana, it can give an attacking wolf or werewolf indestructible until end of turn. Really, that tends to be kind of a win more capability and not something that's hugely overpowering. Arsonist, on the other hand, a 5 mana 5/4 is pretty good on its front side. When it transforms, it becomes a 6/5 with menace, and truly that is a menacing thing. But really, a deck like this, in my opinion, is not looking for 5-drops. I think this is too little too late. I would be focused more on things like Village Messenger, maybe a 3-drop here in the form of the Bandit or the Conduit, and Scourge Wolf as your 2-drop is pretty darn solid. When it comes to green, you've got a lot to offer. Duskwatch Recruiter basically lets you dig 3 cards at a time. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it basically just extends the view of your draw step quite a bit. And that can be a nice bit of acceleration if you do want to run the big top-end deck by helping you get those big creatures at the appropriate time. And when it's not time yet, you can simply pass those back onto the bottom of your library for later use. Hinterland Logger, I think, is one of the more interesting 2-drops in the entire format. or tribe here, it of course is green and a human, but as a 2/1, it's a pretty powerful 2-drop. And once this transforms into a 4/2 with trample, pretty darn solid. But the fact that it always has that weaker toughness makes it a little too easy to deal with sometimes. Moonlight Hunter, I think, is by far the card you want to be interested in here. This is a clear upgrade over the green 3-mana instant speed bite spell that you've got in your starter deck. And if I was going to consider spending draft picks or spending wild cards to upgrade this deck for use in the Eternal formats, this is absolutely where I would be doing it. And really, I think this is the only clear-cut case. From here, we've got some other cards. Captive, Howler. Howler kind of suffers from that same low toughness issue. Wolfpack Resurgence is an interesting enchantment flash. Each creature you control that's a wolf or a werewolf gets +1/+1 and has trample. So you can play that at instant speed, but it is an enchantment and a non-aura enchantment, so it's a little more difficult to remove. And it's a global effect, meaning it hits all of your werewolves simultaneously, not just one like an aura would. Pretty nice. I would consider running these if you have them. This is possibly better than the Night Pack Howl Rare, whatever. I can't remember the name of the spell off the top of my head, but it's part of your starter deck. But obviously one you already have and the other you don't. From here, Pack Guardian is a very nice spell. This is one of the few 4-drops I would really consider running, because if you can discard that land, you're actually getting a very marketable 4-drop that also has flash, and you can create a 2/2 green wolf creature token, so it just creates so much value on the board. And if I was going to run a 4-drop anywhere, that is where it would be. I think 1 or 2 is probably all your deck would want to consider. Thornhide Wolves as a 5-drop 4/5 is just a little too vanilla for consideration. And one of the last cards that I think is interesting enough to consider is the enchantment aura Wolfkin Bond. It gives your creature +2/+2, and if it was, or excuse me, in all cases, it creates a 2/2 green wolf creature token. So again, it adds to the board, and it kind of replaces itself. So if it does happen to get taken out, it's not subject to the same card disadvantage as auras typically are. And if you can put this on something that was already good, it just makes it that much better. But in many cases, this ends up being a bit of a win more. And again, we're talking about a 5-mana card on a deck that really wants to be a little more aggro than that. The last card here, Lupine Prototype, I think is an absolute trap. It's a 2-mana 5/5 that can't attack or block unless a player has no cards in hand. And this deck is not at all about discard or forcing your opponent to get rid of their cards. And I think this is a pie in the sky, what if dream sort of thing that frankly we are just better off without. All right, so all the cards we just finished talking about are illegal in both the Eternal formats, those being Explorer and Historic. At this point, I have adjusted my filtering to show just the cards from the Shadows of the Past sister set. All of these cards currently are only legal in Historic and Historic Brawl. So if you are strictly wanting to be an Explorer player, you're going to want to disregard these cards. There are 3 in particular that I think are worth noting when it comes to a wolf-werewolf style deck. The first is Young Wolf, a 1-drop 1/1 with Undying, which states when this creature dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So in essence, Undying is a form of card advantage, because once they kill the creature, it simply comes back for a second life, making it a 2-for-1 potential card advantage for you as the player. Next up, we have the instant speed 2 mana Moon Mist. Transform all humans, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures other than werewolves and wolves. So when you boil all this down, it's basically a fog effect, meaning that it nullifies combat damage. And more specifically, this is probably a one-sided fog effect for you. But fog effects and even one-sided ones tend to only be good when you are in a behind position. And frankly, I just don't think that's the way you want to build a deck. You never want to be including cards that you are only planning to be good if you're losing the game. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Last up, we've got the Immerwolf, a 3-mana 2/2 gold card, signpost uncommon. This little sucker has Intimidate, which means it cannot be blocked except by artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it. Pretty good stuff there as far as making this difficult to block. In addition, it has a Lord effect. Each other creature you control that's a wolf or werewolf gets +1/+1. The thing to really watch on this, and the number one reason that a lot of folks aren't going to want to run this in Historic, is the last line. Non-human werewolves you control cannot transform. And that has its good points and its bad points, and I'm not going to spend 5 minutes going over the ins and outs on this for this video. If you are considering running this card in Historic, just be very certain that you understand all the mechanical aspects of the transform functions in not only the standard legal day-night cycle werewolves, but also in the other explore historic legal differently mechanically transforming werewolves and wolves, because this is going to impact them. And in particular, I will say the Conduit of Storms, for instance, is a non-human werewolf, so in essence this would stop it from transforming, and that can be no fun.
What's that? You didn't catch all that? Well, Matt would like you to know that any deck list applicable to this video can be found down in the doobly-doo. Hey, let's not forget, the whole reason to participate in these totally free midweek Magic events is the prize support is awesome. And don't forget, if this video gets just 10 likes by 8 p.m. tonight on the day of release, I will be live playing this on my Twitch channel. And with all that having been said, don't forget, smash that like button like Ronnie J would. And until next time, I'll see you in the arena.